My in-laws hosted a family-only barbecue and locked the gate when I arrived, yelling, "You're not welcome." I'd supplied the grill and food, so I arranged for a pickup truck to retrieve it all mid-party. I, 32M, never imagined that a backyard barbecue would be the thing to finally break me. Looking back, I should have seen it coming. The signs were always there, subtle at first, then impossible to ignore. But when you're trying to hold your marriage together, you convince yourself that things aren't as bad as they seem. My wife and I had been married for 6 years. We met in college, got married young, and for a while, everything seemed perfect. Then her parents started getting more involved in our lives. Not in the helpful way that in-laws sometimes do, but in the controlling, suffocating way that makes you feel like a guest in your own marriage. The problems started small. Comments about my job, suggestions about where we should live, opinions about how we spend our money. I worked as a software engineer at a mid-sized tech company. Good salary, stable career, nothing flashy but comfortable. Her father ran a construction business and seemed to think that anyone who didn't work with their hands wasn't really working at all. Her mother was worse in her own way, always finding little ways to remind me that I wasn't quite good enough for their daughter. My wife usually defended me, but over time, I noticed her doing it less and less. The comments would slide by, and she'd change the subject instead of pushing back. I told myself she was just keeping the peace, that it didn't mean anything. I was wrong about that too. 3 weeks before everything fell apart, her mother called about a family barbecue. She told my wife it would be nice to have everyone together, that it had been too long since the whole family gathered. My wife mentioned that I'd recently bought a new grill, one of those high-end propane models with all the attachments. I'd saved up for months because I enjoyed cooking outdoors, and I figured it would be nice to host gatherings at our place. Her mother immediately suggested we bring it to their house for the barbecue. She said their old grill was barely functional, and it would be so much easier if we just brought ours over. Before I could even process the request, my wife had already agreed. I felt a flash of irritation but pushed it down. It was just a grill. I could be the bigger person. Then came the food. Her mother called again a few days later. She'd been thinking about the menu, she said, and with so many people coming, it would be expensive to buy everything. Since we didn't have kids and had dual incomes, would we mind picking up the meat and supplies? She rattled off a list: steaks, burgers, hot dogs, chicken, all the fixings. I did the math in my head. We were looking at close to $600 worth of food. I told my wife I thought it was excessive, that maybe we should split the cost with her siblings. She got defensive, said I was being cheap, that it was just one barbecue and her family would do the same for us. I doubted that, but I didn't want to fight. So I agreed, and we spent the next Saturday loading up our SUV with groceries. The day of the barbecue arrived on a Saturday afternoon. I loaded the grill into our truck that morning, secured it properly, and we drove over to her parents' house around noon. They lived in a nice neighborhood about 30 minutes away, the kind of place with big yards and privacy fences. I'd been there dozens of times, but something felt different as we pulled up to the gate. Her father had installed an electronic gate system a few years back, one of those things that made him feel important. Usually, it was open during family gatherings. Today, it was closed. I parked on the street and walked up to the intercom, my wife right behind me. I pressed the button and waited. Her mother's voice came through, asking who it was. I told her it was us, that we had the grill and all the food. There was a pause, longer than it should have been. Then her father's voice replaced her mother's. He told me the barbecue was family only. Those exact words. Family only. I stood there, confused, thinking it was some kind of joke. I reminded him that we'd brought the grill and all the food, that we'd been invited. He said they'd decided to keep it to immediate family, that I should understand. The intercom went silent. My wife's face went pale. She pressed the button again, asking what was happening. Her mother came back on, her voice tight and formal. She explained that they wanted a day with just their children and grandchildren, that they hoped I wouldn't take it personally. I could hear other voices in the background, her siblings probably, but no one else came to the intercom. I asked about the grill and the food. Her father said we could leave them by the gate, that they'd bring everything in, like I was a delivery driver. My wife started arguing with them through the intercom, her voice rising. She demanded they open the gate, that this was insane. Her mother's response was cold. She told my wife that if she wanted to defend me over her own family, maybe she should think about where her loyalties really lay. That's when I heard it. Her brother's voice in the background, telling her father to just open the gate and get the stuff. Not to let me in, just to get the stuff. Like I was too stupid to hear him or too insignificant to matter. Something snapped inside me, not in an explosive way, but in a quiet, crystallizing way. I suddenly saw everything clearly. The years of comments, the subtle undermining, the way they'd slowly convinced my wife that I wasn't quite worthy of being part of their perfect family. And she'd let them. I looked at my wife. She was still arguing through the intercom, but I noticed she wasn't saying she'd leave with me. She was trying to convince them to let me in. There's a difference. A big one. I pulled out my phone and walked back to the truck. I called the appliance store where I'd bought the grill 3 months earlier. I'd gotten the extended warranty and insurance plan, which included free delivery and haul-away service. I asked if they could come pick up a grill from an address. They said they could have someone there within 2 hours. Then I called the grocery store. I explained that I'd bought a large catering order for a party that had been canceled, and I needed to return everything. The manager I spoke to was sympathetic. She said if the items were still in good condition and I had the receipts, they could process a return. She even offered to send someone to pick it up since it was such a large order. My wife was still at the intercom when I finished making the calls. She turned to me, frustrated, asking what we were going to do. I told her I'd handled it. She asked what I meant. I said I'd arranged for the grill and food to be picked up, that if her family wanted a family-only barbecue, they could provide their own equipment and supplies. She stared at me like I'd grown a second head. She said I was being ridiculous, that I was overreacting. I reminded her that I'd just been told I wasn't family, that I wasn't welcome at an event I'd essentially funded and equipped. She said I was taking it too personally, that her parents were just stressed. I asked her if she was coming with me or staying. She hesitated. That hesitation told me everything I needed to know. She said she should probably go in and talk to them, smooth things over. I told her to do what she needed to do. Then I got in the truck and drove home. The appliance store called me 90 minutes later. They'd arrived at the address and retrieved the grill. The person on the phone sounded amused, said there had been some confusion at the gate, but they'd gotten what they came for. I thanked them and confirmed the grill would go back into my account as store credit. The grocery store called 30 minutes after that. They'd sent a truck and picked up all the food. Everything was still cold and in good condition, so they'd processed a full refund. The manager mentioned that some people at the address had seemed upset, but her driver had the receipts and everything was legitimate. I spent the rest of the afternoon cleaning the garage. It felt good to do something productive, something that didn't involve thinking about what had just happened. My phone kept buzzing with texts and calls, but I ignored them all. My wife came home around 8 that evening. She walked in and immediately started yelling. She said I'd humiliated her, that her entire family was furious, that I'd ruined the barbecue. I listened calmly and asked her how I'd ruined something I wasn't invited to. She said that wasn't the point, that I should have just left the stuff and dealt with it later. I asked her why she'd stayed, why she'd gone inside after they'd told me I wasn't welcome. She got defensive, said she was trying to fix things, that someone had to be the adult. I pointed out that being the adult would have meant leaving with me, standing up for her husband instead of prioritizing her parents' feelings. She sat down on the couch, and I could see her struggling with something. Finally, she admitted that her family had been talking about me for months. They thought I was too soft, too passive, not ambitious enough. They'd convinced her that she could do better, that she'd settled when she married me. She'd been trying to prove them wrong, she said, trying to show them I was a good husband. But today had been a test. I asked what kind of test involved publicly humiliating someone. She didn't have an answer for that. She just kept saying she was sorry, that she didn't know they'd actually lock me out, that she thought they were just being dramatic. I asked her again why she'd stayed. She started crying and said she didn't know. We didn't talk much after that. She slept in the guest room, and I lay awake in our bed, replaying everything in my mind. I realized that this wasn't just about one barbecue. This was about 6 years of slowly losing myself, of being made to feel like I had to constantly prove my worth, of watching my wife choose her parents over me again and again. Update 1. The next morning, I woke up to 17 missed calls and dozens of text messages. Most were from my wife's family. Her mother sent a long message about how disappointed she was in my behavior, how I'd shown my true colors. Her father's texts were shorter and angrier, calling me petty and vindictive. Her siblings chimed in with their own variations of the same theme. My wife came out of the guest room around 9. She looked like she hadn't slept. She asked if we could talk, and I agreed. We sat at the kitchen table, and she tried to explain. She said her family had been pressuring her for months to stand up to me more, to not let me make all the decisions. I pointed out that I barely made any decisions anymore, that I'd spent years deferring to her and her family to keep the peace. She admitted that was true. She said she'd gotten caught up in their narrative, that they'd slowly convinced her I was the problem. But yesterday had opened her eyes, she claimed. Seeing them actually lock me out, watching them take the grill and food without a second thought, it had made her realize how toxic they'd become. I wanted to believe her. Part of me desperately wanted to believe that we could fix this, that this could be the wake-up call we needed. But another part of me, the part that had been beaten down for years, knew that nothing would really change. She'd apologize, we'd move forward, and eventually, her family would worm their way back in. The cycle would continue. I told her I needed time to think. She panicked, asking if I was leaving her. I said I didn't know yet, but I needed space to figure out what I actually wanted. She begged me not to make any rash decisions, promised she'd set boundaries with her family, swore things would be different. I spent that week staying with a friend from work. He'd always been a good sounding board, and he listened while I laid everything out. He pointed out things I'd normalized that weren't normal at all. The constant criticism, the financial manipulation, the way my wife's family had isolated us from my own relatives by always scheduling events that conflicted with my family's gatherings. My wife called every day. At first, she was apologetic and pleading. Then she got angry, accusing me of abandoning her when she needed support. Then back to apologetic. Her messages swung wildly between extremes, and I realized she was probably getting conflicting advice from different people. Her friends were likely telling her one thing, her family another. On Thursday, her mother called me directly. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity got the better of me. She launched into a speech about family unity and forgiveness, about how I needed to be the bigger person. I interrupted her and asked if she'd called to apologize for locking me out of their house. She sputtered, said that wasn't the point, that I'd overreacted by taking back the grill and food. I asked her what she'd expected me to do. She said I should have just left everything and gone home quietly, that making a scene was immature. I pointed out that I hadn't made a scene at all. I'd simply arranged to retrieve my own property. She didn't have a response to that, so she pivoted to talking about how much I was hurting my wife by staying away. I told her that her daughter had a choice to make at that gate, and she'd made it. Her mother got angry then, said I was manipulating the situation, that her daughter had been trying to fix things, and I'd punished her for it. I asked how going inside to enjoy a party I'd been excluded from qualified as fixing things. She hung up on me. Update 2. 2 weeks after the barbecue incident, my wife showed up at my friend's apartment. She looked exhausted, like she'd been crying for days. She said she'd told her family she wasn't speaking to them until they apologized to me. She'd missed her sister's birthday dinner and her nephew's soccer game. Her mother had called her selfish and ungrateful. I asked her why she was telling me this. She said she wanted me to know she was serious about choosing us over them. I asked her if she'd actually told them to apologize or if she'd just stopped taking their calls. She admitted it was more the latter. She hadn't confronted them directly, just avoided them. I sat her down and explained that avoiding them wasn't the same as setting boundaries. Real change meant having hard conversations, telling them explicitly that their behavior was unacceptable and wouldn't be tolerated anymore. She said she didn't know how to do that confronting them felt impossible. That's when I realized we were at an impasse. She wanted things to get better, but wasn't willing to do the work to make that happen. And I was tired of being the only one fighting for our marriage. I told her I wanted a divorce. She broke down completely. She begged me to reconsider, promised she'd do better, said she'd cut her family off completely if that's what I wanted. But I didn't want that. I didn't want her to have to choose between me and her family. I wanted her to want to stand up for me, to see my worth without having to be convinced. And she didn't. The divorce process was messy. Her family blamed me entirely, spread stories about how I'd abandoned their daughter over a simple misunderstanding. Some mutual friends believed them. Others had seen enough over the years to know there was more to the story. I lost some relationships I'd valued, but I also learned who my real friends were. My wife fought the divorce at first, then seemed to accept it, then fought again. Her emotions were all over the place, and I realized she'd never really developed her own identity separate from her family. She didn't know who she was without their influence, and she didn't know who she was supposed to be as my wife. She'd been caught in the middle for so long that she'd lost herself. We finalized everything 6 months later. The house sold quickly, and we split the proceeds. I moved to a smaller place closer to work, started going to therapy, and began rebuilding my life. It wasn't easy. Some days I missed her desperately. Other days I felt nothing but relief. The last time I saw her was at the final court hearing. She looked different, harder somehow. She'd moved back in with her parents temporarily while she figured things out. As we left the courthouse, she stopped me and said she finally understood what I'd been trying to tell her. She said her family had already started criticizing her choices, controlling her schedule, treating her like a child again. She said she was sorry. I told her I was sorry too. Sorry that it had taken losing everything for her to see it. Sorry that her family had damaged her so badly that she couldn't recognize love when she had it. Sorry that I hadn't been strong enough to leave sooner, before the resentment had built up so much that there was no coming back from it. She asked if there was any chance for us in the future. I said I didn't think so. Too much had happened. Too much trust had been broken. She nodded and walked away, and I watched her get into her father's truck. Even then, even after everything, she was still dependent on them. I think about that day at the gate sometimes. How a simple barbecue became the breaking point of my marriage. But I know now that it wasn't really about the barbecue. It was about years of small betrayals, of choosing comfort over courage, of letting other people define the value of our relationship. The barbecue was just the moment when I finally stopped accepting less than I deserved. Would I do anything differently? Maybe. Maybe I should have left sooner, should have insisted on couples therapy years ago, should have drawn harder lines with her family from the start. But I also know that I stayed as long as I could, that I tried everything I knew how to try. Sometimes love isn't enough. Sometimes you need respect and partnership and someone willing to fight for you the way you fight for them. I'm still building my new life. I've reconnected with old friends, started dating casually, picked up hobbies I'd abandoned. I bought a new grill, an even nicer one than before, and I host barbecues at my place now, just for people who actually want me there. And when I lock my gate at night, it's not to keep anyone out. It's to protect what I've built. Because I learned that not everyone who claims to be family deserves access to your life. And sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself is walk away from people who refuse to see your worth. Even if one of those people is supposed to be your partner. If you'd like to see more stories like this, a gentle tap on the subscribe button would mean the world to us.